For about 15 years of my career, I deliberately avoided the topic of innovation. And that was the time when I worked in large organizations and when I actually experienced the topic of innovation as something very dysfunctional. I experienced innovation departments which were completely separated from the rest of the organization, so that the ideas that were developed there actually had a very hard time to get to life, to actually work, to get up into the organization and get operational. I experienced idea collection systems where it took 8 months until an employee who had entered an idea actually got feedback. And when we finally got feedback, the feedback was, what exactly was the input about? And I also experienced and took part in many brainstorming sessions, and probably you have too, where at the end of the day, despite the fact that there were sometimes really good ideas, none of them really made it into the operation. About 2 years ago, that completely changed, and I started to work heavily on the topic of innovation. And I want to share with you my journey today, why that happened and how that happened. So I have 2 goals for you for today. The first one is actually to clarify a misunderstanding and distinguish the difference between an idea and an innovation. And the second thing is that I'd love to give you some understanding about why your individual preferences, your predispositions, how they affect you as an innovator and how they affect you as an ideator, somebody who has ideas. So let's start with the difference between the ideas, the ideation, and the innovation first. When you read the newspapers or you hear politicians and managers talk, they talk a lot about innovation. What they really refer to is very often ideas, ideation. So they refer to the novel thoughts created, often in universities or by startups. And they leave out one specific and very, very important point. Namely that there's a second element that you need to get from an idea to an innovation. And that is the realization. And I just want to give you one example for that. When fighting Ebola, the Ebola virus, there's a major difference between having a great idea of how you can fight that virus and creating a vaccination potentially, towards bringing hundreds of thousands or probably millions of vaccinations to rural Africa and have people apply them so that they can survive. So that's the difference between an idea, the ideation, and the realization is the second part that you really need to get to the innovation level. Because the innovation level always includes a so-called quantifiable gain, something which you can measure, a benefit that drives us as society. So why is the difference between that idea and the innovation and the realization part, why is this so important? Why is this not only a definition? Because we all deal completely different with innovation. Some people have their natural focus more on the ideation side. They love and thrive to work with ideas. We call them the pioneers. The pioneers usually work outside the box. So they like to challenge their systems, the structures. They come up with breakthrough new ideas. Some people say you give a pioneer a task and he comes back with 5 great ideas, none of which really solves the original task that he was given. But that's just, people say that. Also, you have pioneers often appear as chaotic because they have their structure internal. So a classical pioneer's desk is probably cluttered with a lot of papers and books and notes. So people coming in, stepping in the office often think, okay, this guy is not very orderly, he's not very methodological. And the third part is, the third characteristic of a pioneer is that he usually does not like to work on detailed routine tasks for a long time. He easily gets bored. And that can make the pioneer appear as kind of rugged, difficult to work with. Pioneers have a hard time, especially when they work in large organizations. And then we have the second part. We have the builders who prefer to work on realizing things. The builders are more inside the box. So what they do is they try to take the tried and tested methods and apply them towards solving a problem and realizing things. They usually work very efficient and appear as orderly and methodologically. And also, they're kind of the accountants. They love to work on repetitive tasks, routine tasks for a long time. They have no problem in doing that. So I think, as we speak of ideas here, who thinks he's an innovator, who thinks he's a pioneer? Hands up, please. There must be a lot today. So it's great to have you here today. And I want to tell you, you'll probably face a hard time when you work in organizations. Because the organizations love structure. Organizations usually love the builders. So that's the good story, that you're a pioneer, and the bad story is that you have to be aware of what you're dealing with when you work in an organization. So, when we come back to the first thing that I told you about the difference between an idea and a realization, it's critical to understand that you need both. You need the pioneers and you need the builders. And the problem is that they usually do not work together so easily. I think many of you have probably been in meetings where a pioneer and a builder started to fight heavily about things because they have completely different ideas, and often they really, they disconnect. They don't really talk to each other, and so they work on completely different frequencies. And the problem with this is that when this happens, when a pioneer actually and a builder do not connect, what you actually lose is the idea in the process to be realized. So the result is actually not as good as it could be, or actually sometimes there is no result at all, because you have a block in between the ideation level and the realization. And the answer is that we actually worked out is that the pioneers and the builders, they have completely different predispositions. So their preferences to deal with innovation, as I told you before, are different. And there are three main factors that determine whether you are a pioneer and a builder. The first one is the ideation, the level of creativity. Do you want to do something new? Do you want to explore? Then you're more on the pioneering side, otherwise you're more on the building side. The second is the risk predisposition. Pioneers have no time to take big risks. A pioneer will quit his job easily to move for a new company or a new product despite having 5 children at home to feed. The builder has massive problems to do that. Completely different approach. And the last one is the process, which I told you before, the cluttered desk. So pioneers have an internal structure. They find everything on their desk, but nobody else can. So the structure is just inside the pioneer. And the builder, when you enter a builder's office, most likely you'll find everything neatly ordered, in desks, labeled, sorted, so everybody can actually connect. It's easy for somebody stepping in a builder's office and finding something. And you can imagine what that does to the relationship. When a builder enters a pioneer's office, he thinks, oh, I can't work with this guy. It's just not possible. But unfortunately, life is a little bit more kind of complex. We all are a little bit more complex than just having the pioneer and the builder. Because there are other factors which are very essential in forming what kind of pioneer you actually are. Because no pioneer or no builder is the same. We are all different. And I just want to point out one example to illustrate why this is the case and why it has such a massive influence. And that is the factor control. Control actually means how you want to influence your environment, whether you want to be in control of your environment and what you do first, or on the second dimension, whether you are fine with other people taking control of you. So there are two dimensions, whether I want to take control or whether I allow somebody other to take control. And when you put these two dimensions together and you say either yes or no, you come up with different kinds of people. And one example of why this creates such a massive difference you can find in the early days of Apple. We have two extreme pioneers there. You all know them, Steve Jobs and Wozniak. Two extreme pioneers. But the one pioneer is a so-called my way pioneer, the CEO kind of pioneer. He goes out and he wants to create and control his environment and not be controlled by other people. That's Steve Jobs. He knows exactly where he wants to go. And on the other hand, you have Steve Wozniak. And he doesn't want to control anybody. He actually also doesn't want to be controlled. So he's a no-no. And that means he just wants to code because he loves it. That's just his thing. And for you, it is very essential to understand, if you deal with a pioneer, or the other way around with a builder, which kind of pioneer builder you're dealing with. Just imagine sitting across Steve Jobs or Steve Wozniak makes a completely total difference in terms of the conversation and the results that you can achieve. So, when we talk about the innovation gap that I was explaining, this topic does not only impact the way two people get along, because when you look at the results that unfold, the impact can be dramatic. And I just want to give you a couple of examples to connect. Question: what is the most innovative car manufacturer that we currently have? Tesla. Here it goes. Okay, what if I would have told you that Tesla only spends about 3% of the money for innovation and R&D than another leading car manufacturer, and still they achieve groundbreaking results? Another car, they spend about 0.4 billion a year on innovation and R&D, and one of the largest, actually German car manufacturers, they spend 15 billion. So innovation is not only about money. When people tell you that, imagine and remember, it's not only about the money. Money is important, but it's not the only factor. The second example was actually mentioned before, Xerox PARC. That's my favorite example, actually. Xerox PARC is the company that actually laid the ground for all the smartphones, the PC area, and everything that you have in your pocket and work with. They are actually the inventors of the graphical user interface, which was then later adopted by Apple and Microsoft and so forth. They developed the first mouse. They actually prototyped it, and today it still looks exactly the same as it did when they developed it, and so forth. So major groundbreaking developments actually took part. The company Xerox could have been Microsoft plus Apple plus probably IBM together if they would have been able to take these groundbreaking results and put it in a realization. But they deliberately only made the choice to take a laser printer, which they also developed, for whatever reason. So other companies actually took this invention and realized it and created a quantifiable gain that we can benefit today. The topic is so important that when you ask a venture capitalist today, what is the most important factor when making the decision for an investment or not, that they usually come back with the answer, it's the team. And I think that's striking, that's surprising. I always thought before, venture capital, that's about investing in ideas, right? And we had a couple of discussions with them and they said, well, you know, the ideas can be tampered with. We can change them and we can alter them. And usually when we do an investment, these things unfold over time. But we cannot change the team so easily. So if the combination there is not right, if the chemistry is not right, the human factor of innovation is not right, we don't do the investment. And two more examples, a little bit more in the past. The Wright brothers. What distinguishes, or what actually makes this combination of brothers so exceptional is that you had an extreme pioneer and you had an extreme builder in one group. And that's what I said before, when you're able to master the ideation side as well as master the realization side, you can actually create groundbreaking results. So the Wright brothers were able to achieve first flight faster than all the other groups, despite the other groups having 50 times the money and access to resources. So they won the race of first flight despite just having a small cyclist shop in rural America. And another example is the Disney brothers. Again, here you have a couple brothers, one extreme pioneer and one extreme builder, working together. And here comes the point. Why were they so successful? Because they knew each other. They knew about their strengths and their weaknesses. They knew about their predispositions, and they accepted their predispositions. The builder accepted the craziness of the pioneer, and the pioneer accepted the boredom of the realizer. And they were able to leverage their strength. That's actually what makes these combinations, these brothers, so successful. So you might ask the question of how can I access this? How can I make use of this? Well, I mean, not everybody is fortunate enough to have the combination, a brother or a sister, as an extreme pioneer, extreme builder, because there you have a long time to get to know each other. You have trust. In our days, teams are formed much faster, sometimes within hours or days. So you have to find ways to get access and get an idea of who you have sitting across the table and how you can form a great team. And there are tools today that help you to get an idea of who you are as an innovator, who you are more on the pioneering side, or are you more on the realizing side. So, to foster innovation, you need to overcome the gap between the idea and the realization, between the pioneer and the realizer. And you have to build a bridge between the two. And the bridge is actually the acceptance of differences, the acceptance of the diversity that we have, and to leverage this diversity. Without diversity, the innovation results will be much slimmer than they could be if we work together. Thank you very much.